New Year's resolutions are pretty polarizing. Some people look upon the new year with joy at the possibility that this fresh start can bring. Other people honestly kind of look down on those people. They look at them with judgment, even maybe pity, that they wait for an arbitrary day to make a change. Well, if you're like me and if you believe in the power of the human spirit and the ability to change at any point when you put your mind to it, stay tuned because this video is for you. And stay tuned till the end because I'm going to give 10 tips to make sticking to your behavior changes a little bit easier. I'm a personal trainer based in New York City, but my background is in behavior change and psychology. That's what I studied in school. So I blend the theory with what works in the real world with helping people stick to their changes, mostly with food and exercise, but I do help and consult people with other areas of their life too. Now, before I get into the meat and potatoes of this video, I want to tell you a story about every year at New Year's. It is not just folklore. Really, in January, tons of people, hundreds, thousands, I don't know, maybe millions, flock to gyms across the country and join in January. Honestly, usually a little bit after January 1st, around the 7th through the 10th, after people come out of their holiday haze, they are ready to make these changes and join the gym. The gyms are crowded, packed. A lot of my clients are annoyed at this, and I understand because they are there year round and they want to be able to use certain machines. So I understand that. However, there are other people, not my clients, but certain people I just hear talking, sort of making fun of these people, looking down on them for joining the gym in January. And I really want to push back against that negative culture and that culture of judgment for people wanting to make a change right now, because while many people may make fun of them and say they won't be here in 2 weeks or 2 months, you know what? Okay, maybe out of 100 new faces that I see at the gym, at least 3 of them are still there 6 months later, a year later. You know, I've seen one of those people lose 50 pounds, and that's just one that I personally knew that I got to know as he came to the gym starting in January. So, you know what? Who cares what anybody says? You can make a change at any point. And so why not now? Why not this year? And why not you? So many of us had a difficult 2020, and I think that has a lot of people even more fired up to create some changes this year. Now, we will get away from some of the obvious cliches of new year, new me, thinking that you can completely transform your life just because it's a new day on the calendar. Yes, that is not what we're going to talk about here. Let's go ahead and jump in with some of the psychology of why this can help. When I gave the numbers of 3 out of 100 sticking around the gym and creating those changes, just know the numbers can be much higher than that. That's just maybe some of the faces that I recognize out of the people that I see flooding to the gym. There's a lot of research pointing to the fact that New Year's can be a great time to start. First, there was something I heard on Freakonomics Radio. Dr. Catherine Milkman was a guest discussing what she refers to as the fresh start effect, citing how New Year's and even just the start of a new month or maybe even a week could be a great time to create a change. I don't remember if she said a week, but I know that she did say that the idea of a fresh start can be motivating for people and can help them stick to a change despite a lot of people saying the contrary these days. And additionally, in a YouTube video I'm going to link below by Dr. Mike Evans, he discusses some research by Dr. John Norcross, who is a leading researcher also in behavior change, and he has studied creating changes at New Year's, and he found that people were more likely to stick to changes made at New Year's compared to other times of the year. I encourage you to go look at some of that research yourself because we're not really going to dive into it, but I do want to say that some psychology does support this idea that a certain date on the calendar could be beneficial for your goals, even though the general public likes to push back saying it is just arbitrary. And in a way it is. I understand that that's why I know I'm going back and forth because I'm trying to explain a complicated shade of gray in between some polarizing ideas. And there's a grain of truth to every cliche. There's a reason why people create changes on New Year's, and Dr. Mike Evans went into this too, that it can be a really reflective time of year. You know, we're slowing down over the holidays. We're thinking about the year ahead. We don't really pause and reflect or think about things that often. You know, we're breaking down our life maybe into different areas, our finances, our time, our physical health, our relationships. We're pausing to reflect and thinking about how am I doing? Where do I want to go from here? What kind of a person do I want to be? And what is the trajectory of my life? How do I feel about it? We love the idea of a fresh start. We love a blank page. We love a start of the love story, whether it's our own or one that we're reading about. We love babies and puppies. We love fresh things. We love newness. And we don't get that often, as people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. We don't get newness that much. A lot of it's day after day and the same old thing. And so while, yes, you can make a change on March 12th on a Tuesday, and I encourage you to if that's when you feel motivated to. If you are making a change this year, let's talk about some tips to help you stick to those changes. This is talked about so much, but it is because it's important. Firstly, picking something that you can do. I think that one of the main pushbacks against the New Year, New Me philosophy is because people are trying to do that, to literally make over their entire life. And that just doesn't work. It's very, very rare that someone changes their entire life in a day. And usually if they do, it's because of one thing they did. Like maybe they finally got sober and then as a result, all these other things were able to snowball and change. That's really hard to do something like getting sober or something that's very difficult to change. So to try to do a new workout routine, stop smoking, completely overhaul your finances by budgeting better, go through everything in your home, create some sort of behavioral change in your relationships to others. Try to overhaul every category of your life just doesn't work. For example, with food and fitness, I work so much with my clients on creating sustainable changes that we can layer on top of each other so that then maybe in a year, oh my gosh, some of your habits are almost unrecognizable how different they were a year ago, but you're not trying to do everything at once. So that would be my first tip. Also, allowing yourself what I call a ramp. So if you start a few weeks before, or if you're watching this, I'm putting this out on the 22nd. Yep, just had to check the date. And if you start today, if you're watching this or whenever you are, if it's a little bit before New Year's, it can be helpful because we know it takes some time to create new habits. So it allows yourself that trial and error time, that kind of getting set up time, that time to see what works, what doesn't, and troubleshoot, fix the bugs along the way. Now, if you do start on the 1st, that is totally fine, but give yourself some grace and understanding because you didn't allow yourself that time. It's what I think of as a ramp or like if you're in an airplane, you don't just go into the sky right away. You have the runway and you first have to get going. So giving yourself that time can be tip number 2. Tip number 3 is probably the most important, and it has to be something that you authentically, really genuinely want to change and feel ready to change. Because if you don't feel ready to make a change, you won't make it no matter what day of the week it is. And if you do feel ready to make a change, you will make it no matter what day it is. So really take some time and think about if this is something you feel ready to make the change with, if you feel intrinsically motivated to. And I know that motivation also gets a bad rap because sometimes it does take discipline. It takes that ability to do something even when you're not feeling motivated to. By motivated to make a change, what I actually mean is, are you ready to make this change? Do you actually want to? It may not mean that you feel like doing it every minute of every day. That's not what I mean. I just mean, like, for example, I've seen people flip a switch and all of a sudden start caring about their health a lot more. It doesn't mean that every day is perfect or every day they feel motivated to. I just mean there was some sort of switch where they were finally ready to take it more seriously. Which brings me to another tip, which is this the right point in your life? And if it's not, let's pick a date on the calendar when it is, because maybe something really matters to you, but you're in a genuinely stressful time or you're really busy. So if New Year's isn't a good point, but that is a point where you're reevaluating different areas of your life, let's pull out the calendar and see when is a good time to make that change. So yes, you're reevaluating right now and you're setting the intention now, you're setting the goal now, but then you're going to actually flip that switch at another point. What are ways that you can reduce the friction, the resistance? That may mean finding the problems, like what's gotten in the way. If this is something that you've tried to change year after year, really take some time and journal about what has gotten in the way. I'll give you an example. So about a week ago, I'm right now with family, and about a week ago, I was ready to make some changes as far as nutrition. Nothing big, but just get back on track, because sometimes we get off track and that's normal. And I realized I do not have in the house what I need. And I write about this, I coach about this, but it can happen to anyone. If you wake up and the groceries aren't there, it's not possible. Now, that's a really simple example, but if you don't have the gym equipment, if you don't have the membership, if you don't have the tennis shoes to get outside, what can you do to help? If you don't know what you're doing, can you learn about it beforehand? Like, we need to set up the infrastructure to help make this more possible. And a lot of times that is social support. That is why that's talked about that. So go ahead and tell a trusted friend or a couple, maybe a loved one, anyone that can help you. That doesn't mean you have to shout this from the mountaintops. If you do better keeping these important goals to yourself, but I do recommend getting at least a small support network. That was a few tips rolled into one. Additionally, with making this a little bit easier, earlier we talked about not setting too many goals. And what about also just making sure that it's not too big of a goal? Like, I think one huge one people do with food is I will stop eating sugar, or I will stop eating gluten or dairy, or, any sort of big category, or like I'll never go over my calories, or I'll work out every day. And so it's like, sure, they maybe only picked one category or one goal, but it's a pretty big one that doesn't really feel that doable, especially something like sugar, where it's like maybe you could make a healthier alternative for your treats, but you're going to try to stop eating processed food. Like, even just no more ice cream for certain people that they find that a difficult trigger food, that could be a big enough goal, because they know that if they have a couple pieces of candy at night, it's not as big of a deal, and they're not going to be eating nearly as much sugar or calories or processed foods if they just have a little bit of what they enjoy, or try making their own healthier alternatives. Like, finding those ways to maybe break a big, huge, intimidating goal down into something that they know they can do. And another way to make it more manageable is, instead of, like, sure, you can start on the first or start before the first because we want that ramp, but maybe just do it for a month and then reevaluate, so that you know that you can achieve it, you can get that check mark and that win, even a day or a week. Like, considering all of those small wins along the way and doing it for a time that feels reasonable. I know that it feels kind of it's romanticized to do something for the whole year, but if that feels intimidating, and if that feels like more resistance to starting, considering just doing it for a shorter chunk of time and then counting that win and then reevaluating from there. We also stop trusting ourselves when we set New Year's resolutions year after year and then they don't come true. And I think that jadedness, that lack of trust with ourselves, also is part of the reason New Year's resolutions get so much pushback. If you take a year off, like if you're like, you know what, I don't feel like committing to something this year, that can even be positive. Like, last year, I don't think I set a New Year's resolution. That is also where setting really small goals or setting shorter goals can be positive, because it can help build that sense of self-trust that when you make a promise to yourself, you follow through on it. We also need a way to track and monitor these things. Notice how I said I don't think I set a New Year's resolution last year. What? Okay, well, I actually remember what I did. I did this awesome exercise by Forloe that I will link below. It is a decade in review. So I think I more just reviewed my last decade, since it was 2020, and then set new goals for the next decade, which sounds really mind-boggling for certain people that don't love that stuff, like thinking about 10 years at a time, but it can be really cool to zoom out and get a macro view. But I think there have been years where I've literally forgotten what resolutions I set. So if you leave out the sticky notes somewhere, if you write it on the bathroom mirror, or if you just leave out the notebook where you set these goals and wrote them down, as opposed to tucking it under the bed or in the drawer, that can be really helpful, because sure, life gets in the way and happens. So maybe in, 3 weeks into the new year, it's not that you quit in some, throwing your hands up in the air fashion where you're exasperated. Maybe you just literally forgot, and that's okay. So you might need that nudge and that little push to get back in, and then with no shame, it's not even really restarting. It's just getting back on the bike. You were on the journey. It's not like you start from the beginning just because you fell off. So just get back on the bike. I guess that would be another tip. I'm probably doing more than 10 here. I'm just throwing tips at you. We got one more. And it's the idea of the outside in versus the inside out. Do you change better when you first really work on those deep internal issues and then you see those changes manifested in the real world? Or do you create more change by just doing it, making a change, putting on the new outfit, stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something, and then you feel better and you can keep going? The answer is yes, both. So try it, see what happens. Some things are really wired deeply. Maybe if you feel paralyzed to stand up for yourself, then you might need some therapy or some deeper work on that, because there might be some trauma there. And I really can't stand it when people just tell those people, just do it, or just don't be anxious, don't overthink it. But at the same time, I do understand that trying something new or doing something, any sort of change, whether it's just moving, apartments, or redoing your apartment, or, changing your hair or something else, can give us a different mindset and a push. There was, while we're on the topic of different psychology research in this video, if you've read Thinking Fast and Slow, or, seen a lot of stuff, they had people put a pencil in their mouth, kind of forces a smile, and it literally created changes in their feeling states. So it's like, when you act the part and then you start feeling it. So that can be another reason why New Year's resolutions can work, is because you're flipping the switch and then you're creating the change, and then you become that kind of a person that does those kinds of things, as opposed to waiting till you feel up to it. It's like, yes, it's an arbitrary day, and that can be a good thing, because that can shove you into being this new person. And, I hate to even say this new person, because that person was always inside of you, and you are that person, and you are still the same person, in January. And so if you hear me playing both sides, like I said, that's because I really like to see all sides of an issue, and like both sides on kind of a polarizing thing, and bridge the gap and help make it actionable for you guys. If you've watched all the way to this point in the video, I want to throw something out for you guys. Well, two things. One, if you do want help setting new changes, the number one goals are usually have to do with food and exercise in the new year. And I do have a book coming out in January 2021. So if you are watching this towards the end of the month, that book is probably already out. You can find it on Amazon. It is Fit Intuition, Listen to Your Body, and Never Diet Again. I will link it down below later. But get that, because it will really help you set some changes in a very sustainable way that are not too extreme, but where you really will see results. And then I would love to hear from you guys if you would like to, because that book is more on like the moderate approach, which really works for so many people. I do believe though that there's this other part of us that believes we can flip the switch and just make the change when we need to, the line in the sand. I believe that all of us have that inside of us. And I think it's become oversimplified in our culture. So that's what I've been working on as a possible next book. I normally don't say this kind of stuff, especially not on Instagram or broadcasting it widely when I'm not sure about a new project, but I would love to hear if you find that kind of thing interesting, or if you would be interested in that book, that like other side of the spectrum, because we have moderation and then we have, flipping that switch. And I would love to hear if you'd be interested in reading more about that kind of thing. Okay, so subscribe and hit that bell for notifications to get more content like this. I do new videos every Tuesday on psychology, fitness, and self-development, and catch you guys next week. Happy holidays, by the way, whatever you celebrate. I love you, I appreciate you, and thank you for being here.